The city of Riverside Heights was waking up slowly that morning, sun streaking gold through the clouds, traffic humming across the bridges, and the quiet rhythm of another ordinary weekday. But for Malcolm Reeves, it was anything but ordinary. He sat alone in a small diner on Main Street, a half-empty cup of coffee steaming beside him, the newspaper folded neatly to the crime section. He read every headline carefully, like a man searching for something beneath the ink. Not the story itself, but the truth hiding between the lines. Malcolm was in his 40s, tall, quiet, the kind of man whose presence filled a room without a word. He dressed simply, dark suit, polished shoes, eyes calm but unreadable. To the world, he looked like any other working man, grabbing breakfast before a long day. But there was more to him. As the waitress poured another cup of coffee, two police cruisers rolled to a stop outside the diner. The hum of conversation faded. Through the window, Malcolm saw the officers stepping out. One of them, Sergeant Vance, known in Riverside for his temper and his pride. He was the kind of cop who measured his worth in authority, not justice. Vance scanned the diner until his eyes landed on Malcolm. He nudged his partner. That's him. The door jingled as they entered, their presence cutting through the room like static. "Mornin', gentlemen," Malcolm said calmly, without looking up. "Malcolm Reeves." Vance's tone wasn't friendly. "Yes. You're under arrest for obstruction of a federal investigation." Gasps spread through the diner. The waitress froze mid-step, holding the coffee pot. Malcolm blinked once, expression unchanging. "That's an interesting accusation. Mind if I ask which investigation?" "Save it," Vance snapped, pulling out the cuffs. "Stand up." Every eye in the diner followed as Malcolm slowly rose. His movements were measured, calm, deliberate, too controlled for someone being accused of a federal crime. Vance yanked his hands behind his back. "You have the right to remain silent." "I know my rights," Malcolm said softly, cutting him off. Vance glared. "Then you know resisting won't help." "Neither will ignorance," Malcolm replied. The tension was thick enough to choke on. Vance shoved him toward the door, smirking when Malcolm stumbled slightly on the curb. Outside, camera phones were already recording. People whispered, "What did he do? He doesn't look dangerous." Malcolm said nothing. He simply looked at the morning sun as they pushed him into the back of the cruiser. A man who knew something no one else did. At the precinct, Detective Lena Cross was the first to greet him. Young, sharp, ambitious. The kind of detective who believed rules were tools, not obstacles. She stepped into the interrogation room, where Malcolm sat handcuffed, posture straight, eyes focused on nothing in particular. "I've got to say," she said, setting a file on the table, "you don't look like the kind of guy who crosses the bureau." Malcolm gave a small smile. "Appearances deceive, detective." "Then help me understand why your name showed up on a restricted data breach." "I'm sure you already have your theory." She tilted her head. "Maybe I'd rather hear yours." Malcolm met her gaze unflinching. "Then you'd better start asking the right questions." Outside the room, Sergeant Vance watched through the one-way glass, arms crossed. "He's smug," he muttered. "Knows something we don't." Lena frowned. "Or maybe we're arresting the wrong man." Vance scoffed. "You think he's innocent?" "I think," she said, "he's not scared enough to be guilty." Hours passed. The precinct grew restless. Calls came in from City Hall, then from the Bureau itself. Vance ignored them all, convinced he had something big. Inside the interrogation room, Malcolm remained calm. He hadn't asked for a lawyer. He hadn't protested. He simply waited, like a man timing his move. Finally, Lena stepped back in. "You've been sitting here for 3 hours." Not a word, from your side. That tells me either you're hiding something, or I'm waiting for you to realize who I am. Malcolm interrupted. Her brow furrowed. Excuse me? He leaned forward slightly, voice low and steady. You think this is about obstruction? It's not. It's about who you've been taking orders from. She froze. What are you talking about? He nodded toward the mirror. Ask your sergeant. Outside, Vance's radio crackled. Unit 9 respond. He ignored it. His focus was on Malcolm, this man who spoke like he was still in control. Then a call came through the precinct landline. Urgent. Coded. The desk officer answered, listened, then went pale. Sir, the FBI just called. They're asking why we have Director Reeves in custody. Director who? Vance barked. Director Malcolm Reeves, Internal Affairs Division. Vance's face drained of color. Release him immediately, the voice on the other end demanded. You have 5 minutes before this becomes a career-ending mistake. All right. Back in the room, Lena's phone buzzed. She answered quietly, listened, and then turned toward Malcolm with wide eyes. You're, she began. FBI, he finished for her. Tone even. Director of Internal Oversight. And you, Detective Cross, just became part of a federal case. Her throat went dry. We were told you. I know, he said. Vance told you I was obstructing, didn't he? He's been moving evidence out of the system for months. I was the one tracking him. Lena stared through the glass. Vance was gone. Where is he? She demanded. Malcolm stood, shaking the cuffs loose from his wrists with a small click. The lock already undone. He placed them neatly on the table. Probably running. How did you? He gave a faint smile. Detective, you really think I'd let anyone put real cuffs on me? She followed him out of the room, heart pounding. If what you're saying is true, you just walked into a trap. He paused by the door. No, I built one. By the time they reached the parking lot, Vance's cruiser was gone. Tire tracks burned into the asphalt. Malcolm looked at the horizon, expression unreadable. He knows I'm onto him. That means he'll make a mistake. Lena looked at him, her voice barely above a whisper. What kind of mistake? He turned toward her, eyes steady, the kind that ends careers or lives. That night, the city lights flickered against the dark sky. Somewhere out there, a dirty cop was running. But he wasn't running from guilt. He was running from the man he'd just handcuffed. And that man, Director Malcolm Reeves, had just begun his real investigation. Rain rolled down the glass windows of the Riverside Police Department, turning the world outside into a blur of red and blue lights. The storm had come fast, as if the city itself was washing away the lies that had been festering inside its walls. Inside, Detective Lena Cross sat at her desk, still shaken by what she'd learned hours earlier. Her mind replayed the scene in that interrogation room. Malcolm Reeves, calmly revealing his true identity, the cuffs clicking open like a warning shot to every corrupt officer in the building. Director of FBI Internal Oversight, the man she'd just interrogated. She ran a hand through her hair. God, what have we done? Across the precinct, phones rang and officers whispered. Everyone had heard by now. Sergeant Vance, once the loudest man in the room, had vanished. His locker was empty, his files gone. It was like he'd evaporated. Only one man wasn't surprised. Malcolm Reeves. He stepped through the front doors of the station, wearing the same dark suit, but with a different energy now. Authority. Silence followed him like a shadow. Even the captain straightened when he entered. Mr. Reeves, Captain Moreno began cautiously. If we'd known, Malcolm raised a hand. If you'd known, you might have warned him. The captain swallowed. We'll cooperate in any way the Bureau needs. You already are, Malcolm replied. Every officer here is under federal review, starting today. Whispers erupted across the bullpen, some fearful, some angry. Lena stood and approached him carefully. Director Reeves, I'd like to assist. I know this department. I know Vance. Malcolm turned to her, his expression unreadable. Then you know how dangerous he is. She nodded. He's connected. If he's running, he's not alone. That's why I'm staying, Malcolm said quietly. Because this isn't just about one dirty cop. It's about the system that protects him. That night, Malcolm sat alone in a dimly lit conference room, scrolling through years of disciplinary files. The names blurred together, minor infractions, missing evidence, dismissed complaints. But a pattern emerged. Every case Vance touched ended in silence. He opened one file, Rodriguez J., a patrol officer who'd filed a misconduct report 3 years ago against Vance. The note at the bottom read, "Case closed. Officer resigned. No further inquiry." Malcolm's jaw tightened. "No further inquiry," he muttered. That's how they bury the truth. Lena entered quietly, holding 2 coffees. "You look like you've been awake since the last decade." "Feels that way," he said, accepting the cup. "Did you pull the traffic cam data I asked for?" "Yeah," she said, sitting beside him. "Vance's cruiser left the station at 7:42 p.m. last night. He didn't take the freeway. He used surface roads, headed south." Malcolm nodded. "He's not leaving town. He's meeting someone." "Who?" He looked at her. "The person who told him to arrest me." Across town, in a dim parking garage beneath an office tower, Sergeant Vance paced nervously beside his car. His hands shook as he lit a cigarette. The rain hissed outside. A black SUV pulled up. The door opened. A man in a tailored coat stepped out, silver hair, expensive shoes, the kind of confidence money can buy but morality can't. "Vance," the man said smoothly, "you look terrible." Vance scowled. "You didn't tell me who he really was." "I told you what you needed to know," the man said, "and you failed. He's FBI, internal affairs. He's digging into everything." The man smirked faintly. "Then dig faster." Vance clenched his fists. "You don't understand. I can't stay here. He's got connections. He'll come for me." The man leaned in close. "Then disappear. But remember, you talk, and it won't be the FBI that finds you first." He dropped a sealed envelope into Vance's hand. "New ID, cash, Mexico." The SUV drove off, leaving Vance alone in the echoing garage. He tore open the envelope and froze. Inside wasn't money. It was a single photo. A picture of his wife and son. With a note, "Don't disappoint us again." And the next morning, Lena found Malcolm reviewing security footage from nearby businesses. He paused one frame, the SUV's license plate half visible in the rain. "Got it," she said. "I'll run the tag." Malcolm nodded. "No need. I already did." She frowned, and he turned the screen toward her. "Registered to a shell company under Warrendale Holdings." Lena blinked. "The same group, tied to that HOA corruption case last month?" He smiled faintly. "Now you're catching on. It's all connected. The fake inspections, property fraud, the intimidation tactics. Different masks, same face." "Who's behind it?" she asked. "Not sure yet, but they've got eyes in law enforcement." Vance was one of their enforcers, a man who kept neighborhoods under control by making examples of anyone who fought back. Lena exhaled slowly. "And you think Warrendale has people inside the Bureau?" Malcolm met her gaze. "I don't think. I know." By midday, Ramirez, the FBI liaison from the Warrendale case, arrived with a folder. "We ran facial recognition on that SUV driver. he said. He's on 2 corporate boards and 5 fake charities. Name's Arthur Keaton. On paper, he's clean. Off paper? Malcolm asked. Ramirez hesitated. He's untouchable. Donations to both political parties, friends in federal housing, real estate deals with judges. Money laundering, Malcolm said quietly. And the cops are the muscle that keeps people silent. Ramirez looked uneasy. This goes higher than any of us thought. Malcolm stood, grabbing his coat. Good. Then we start climbing. That evening, as the rain slowed to a drizzle, Lena followed Malcolm to a quiet residential area near the docks. The houses were dark, but one still had a faint light flickering behind the curtains. That's Vance's safe house, Malcolm said. He's there, or whoever's cleaning up after him. They moved silently to the porch. Malcolm signaled her to stay behind, then knocked twice. No answer. He waited, knocked again. This time, the door opened slightly. A trembling voice whispered from inside. You shouldn't be here. Vance, Malcolm said calmly. We need to talk. The man's face appeared in the dim light, pale, terrified. You don't get it. They're watching everything. I'm dead already. Then tell me before you are, Malcolm replied. Who's giving the orders? Vance shook his head. You think this started with me? You think I wanted this? Names, Malcolm said firmly. Now. Vance hesitated, then whispered. Arthur Keaton, but he's just a face. The real power. Before he could finish, a shot shattered the window. Vance's body jerked, the words dying in his throat. Lena screamed. Malcolm ducked, pulling her down behind the couch. A second shot hit the wall. Sniper. Malcolm hissed. Move! They crawled toward the back door as glass rained down around them. The light from the street flickered once, and then went dark. Whoever was outside wasn't just silencing Vance. They were sending a message. As Malcolm and Lena escaped into the rain-soaked alley, he glanced back at the smoking window. This wasn't about stopping me, he said grimly. It was about warning me. Warning you of what? Lena gasped, breathless. He looked at her, eyes cold and steady. That the bureau isn't as clean as I thought. The morning after the shooting, Riverside Heights woke beneath a thick fog. The rain had stopped, but the air still felt heavy, like the city itself was holding its breath. Inside the bureau's local field office, Director Malcolm Reeves stood by the window, coffee untouched, watching the gray skyline. Behind him, chaos unfolded. Phones ringing, agents moving fast, whispers flying like wildfire. News of Sergeant Vance's death had broken before dawn. The official report called it a domestic dispute. Malcolm knew better. He'd seen clean kills before. That was no dispute. That was a message. Detective Lena Cross entered quietly, holding a folder. Her face looked pale, but determined. They've already closed the case, she said flatly. No investigation, no autopsy delay. They burned through the paperwork in under 6 hours. Malcolm turned slowly. Who signed it? Captain Moredo. Under whose authority? District Attorney's Office. But the signature on the order. She hesitated, flipping the file around. Was Arthur Keaton's. Malcolm's jaw tightened. He doesn't work for the DA's office. I know, she said. But someone high enough let him sign it anyway. He set the coffee down. Then this goes deeper than the department. She met his eyes. How deep are we talking? He looked out the window again, the fog rolling over the rooftops, all the way to the courthouse. Later that day, Malcolm entered the federal courthouse downtown, his steps echoing off the marble floor. The building smelled like polished stone and politics. He was greeted by Deputy Director Samuel Graves, an older man with graying hair and the kind of smile that rarely reached the eyes. "Malcolm," Graves said warmly, extending a hand. "Heard about the Riverside situation. Nasty business. You holding up?" Malcolm shook his hand but didn't smile. "You knew I was there." Graves tilted his head. "Of course. Internal oversight doesn't sneeze without my knowing." "Then you know they tried to kill me last night." Graves chuckled softly. "Let's not dramatize. You and I both know the field can be unpredictable." Malcolm's gaze sharpened. "I also know Warrendale Holdings has been laundering millions through property fronts protected by law enforcement, and you've been approving their clearance checks." The smile faded. "Careful, Malcolm. That sounds like an accusation." "It's not," he said. "It's a fact." Graves stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You're playing a dangerous game. There are people who prefer quiet resolutions. You keep digging, and you won't like what you find." Malcolm leaned in slightly. "I've already found it." For a long moment, the two men stared each other down, silence like a drawn weapon between them. Then Graves smiled again, cold and composed. "You forget who made you, Director Reeves. Remember your chain of command." Malcolm walked past him without another word. In the courthouse parking lot, Lena waited by the car, arms crossed. "How'd it go?" "He's part of it." Her stomach dropped. "You're sure?" "I didn't need to be. He practically admitted it." She swallowed. "Then what do we do now?" He paused before getting in. "We stop talking to law enforcement. From now on, trust no one in a badge unless I clear them." That night, the city's power flickered briefly. A blackout rolling across a few blocks downtown. In the dark, Malcolm worked under candlelight, typing encrypted notes into his laptop. He was building a case file, not for Warrendale, not for the department, but for himself. Evidence so detailed, so damning, that even the Bureau couldn't bury it. Lena arrived quietly, placing a sandwich on his desk. "You should eat." He didn't look up. Later. "You haven't slept in 2 days." He finally stopped typing, leaning back in his chair. "Sleep's a luxury when the people who run the justice system are breaking it." She sat across from him. "You could walk away. Go public. Force it into the light." Malcolm looked up. His eyes, tired but unshaken, met hers. "No. If I go public now, they'll call me a rogue agent, discredit me. I need to end this from inside." "How?" He gave a faint smile. "By making them believe they've already won." 2 days later, the courtroom buzzed with reporters, lawyers, and flashing cameras. It was the hearing for the Riverside Corruption Inquiry, a preliminary review that had been rushed onto the docket after media attention grew too loud to ignore. Arthur Keaton sat at the defense table. Expensive suit, arrogant posture. The man looked untouchable, surrounded by his lawyers and whispers of power. At the prosecution's side sat Malcolm and Lena. Officially, they were observers, not witnesses, not plaintiffs. Unofficially, they were waiting for their moment. The judge entered, and the room fell silent. Court is now in session. As the hearing began, Malcolm stayed quiet, watching Keaton's every move. His lawyers spun stories, twisting facts, claiming the FBI's investigation was based on false warrants. Half an hour in, the judge turned to Malcolm. "Director Reeves, you've been mentioned multiple times in these proceedings. Would you like to respond?" Malcolm stood slowly. The air changed, subtle but unmistakable. "Your Honor," he said, voice calm and firm. "I would." He approached the bench, a thick black folder in hand. The defense claims this case is built on false warrants. That's interesting, considering I personally signed every one of them. Keaton shifted uncomfortably. Malcolm continued. And before we go further, I'd like to make a record correction. The Bureau's involvement in this case was not random. It began when a federal task force discovered shell transfers between Warrendale Holdings and law enforcement payroll accounts, including this courthouse. A murmur swept through the crowd. The judge frowned. Director Reeves, are you accusing officers of this court? I'm not accusing anyone, Malcolm said. I'm proving it. He opened the folder and placed several documents on the bench. Every transaction, every falsified record, every bribe, including those tied to the office of Deputy Director Samuel Graves. The courtroom exploded in whispers. Keaton's attorney stood. Objection. These are confidential Bureau records. Malcolm glanced toward him, unflinching. They were confidential. Now they're evidence. The judge banged her gavel. Order. But Malcolm wasn't finished. He turned toward Keaton. You thought killing Vance would silence this. You thought fear would keep me quiet. His voice lowered, steady and dangerous. But fear works only on men who have something to lose. I already lost that long ago. Keaton's mask cracked for the first time. When the session ended, chaos erupted outside the courthouse. Reporters shouting questions, agents rushing between cars, flashbulbs igniting like lightning. Lena stayed close as they pushed through the crowd. You just declared war on half of Washington, she said under her breath. Malcolm gave a faint smirk. Good. Maybe now they'll stop pretending it's peace. That night, back at the safe house, Lena watched the news as federal vehicles surrounded the Bureau headquarters. Raids, arrests, seizures, the beginning of something much bigger. She turned to Malcolm. You did it. You actually did it. Whoa. He looked at the window, the city lights flickering in the distance. Not yet. We cut the branches. The roots are still underground. Then what happens next? She asked. He picked up his badge from the table, scratched, worn, but still shining faintly under the lamp. Next, he said, quietly, we go after the ones who planted the tree. The next morning, Riverside Heights was no longer quiet. The courthouse reveal had detonated like a bomb. Headlines, breaking news, political outrage. Every news anchor in the state had Malcolm Reeves' name on their lips. FBI director exposes federal corruption network. Millions laundered through fake housing programs. Government scandal deepens. More names expected. But behind the flashing lights and microphones, something darker was moving. For every truth Malcolm uncovered, someone powerful was already trying to bury it. Inside, a black SUV parked across the street from the safe house. A man in a gray suit spoke quietly into a phone. Yes, sir. We found him. Reeves is still in the city. But it won't be long before he realizes the Bureau's not on his side anymore. He listened, then nodded. Yes, I understand. Make it look internal. No witnesses. The call ended. The man started the engine. Back inside, Malcolm watched the chaos unfold on the television. Every channel spun the story differently. Some called him a hero. Others called him a traitor. Detective Lena Cross stood beside him, clutching her coffee mug tightly. They're painting you as a whistleblower, gone rogue. Malcolm smirked faintly. Good. That means they're scared. Press. They're also hunting you, she said. The Bureau issued a recall on your credentials this morning. They're claiming your clearance was revoked weeks ago. He didn't even look surprised. That's how they isolate you. Erase the paper trail, discredit your name, then lose the evidence. Lena frowned. So what do we do? He turned from the TV, eyes sharp. We stop being reactive. We take the fight to them. We take the fight to them. Later that day, Malcolm drove to an abandoned post office on the edge of the city. The air smelled of dust and rain. Inside, computers hummed quietly, an off-grid hub built by Ross, his old tech specialist, from the Internal Oversight Division. Ross was there, typing furiously. "Man, I told you this day would come," he said as Malcolm entered. "I've been pulling data since the second they revoked your access. Guess what? You're officially a non-person." Malcolm raised an eyebrow. Meaning? Meaning your file doesn't exist. Birth certificate wiped. Service record gone. As far as the Bureau's database is concerned, Malcolm Reeves never worked there. Lena's eyes widened. They erased his entire identity? Ross nodded grimly. Standard black budget cleanup protocol. They only do this for high-value threats. Malcolm smiled faintly. Good. Then we're finally hurting the right people. Malcolm said quietly, it's a front. They fund deep cover-ups for government contracts, the kind that never make it to Congress. They handle blackmail, data manipulation, even targeted disappearances. Lena's voice dropped. You're saying the same people behind the housing corruption are connected to federal shadow programs? Malcolm nodded slowly. And they just turned one of those programs on me. That night, as the trio pored over encrypted files, a sudden buzz from the security monitors made everyone freeze. A black van had pulled up outside the old post office. Ross cursed. We've been traced. Shut it down, Malcolm barked. Lights cut out instantly. The hum of the servers died. They crouched in darkness, the only sound their breathing. Boots hit the pavement outside. Voices, low, disciplined, military. Federal Task Unit. One said, target confirmed inside. Proceed. Lena whispered, they're using bureau tags. Those aren't bureau, Malcolm replied quietly. That's Gray Foundation. He motioned toward the back. We move, now. They slipped through a maintenance tunnel beneath the building as the front door exploded behind them. Gunfire echoed down the hall, the crack of bullets shredding metal and concrete. They ran until their lungs burned. By the time they surfaced 2 blocks away, the old post office was a smoking ruin. Ross gasped. They're destroying everything. Malcolm stared at the flames. Not everything. We still have the truth. Hours later, they regrouped at an old mechanic shop, owned by a retired officer, a man Malcolm had once helped years ago. The place smelled of oil and rust, but it was safe. For now. Lena leaned against a workbench, still shaken. They blew up a government building. They'll blame it on us. Malcolm nodded. Exactly. They need the world to see me as the villain before I can speak again. Ross pulled out a hard drive from his coat. Not all's lost. I backed up the Warrendale data before we were hit. Keaton's fingerprints are all over it. Payments, wire logs, even surveillance photos. Malcolm's eyes lit with purpose. Then we've got one chance left. Go public before they do. Lena frowned. How? The media's already turning. Malcolm smiled faintly. Not the mainstream. Independent channels. Underground journalists. The ones they can't control. Ross nodded. I know a contact. A live feed network out of Chicago. They specialize in whistleblower drops. Then that's our next move, Malcolm said. We broadcast everything. Names, dates, operations, all of it. By morning, the video was ready. A grainy recording of Malcolm, sitting at a bare desk, eyes steady on the camera. My name is Malcolm Reeves, he said. I served this country for 20 years in the FBI's Internal Oversight Division. I've seen corruption before, but never like this. The Warrendale Group has infiltrated law enforcement, the ports, and the Bureau itself. They've erased identities, manipulated justice, and silenced truth. But this time, the silence ends. He paused, his expression unwavering. They can erase my name, but not the evidence. They can bury my file, but not what I've seen. And if this message goes live, it means they've already tried to stop me. He ended the video with one final line. Justice isn't blind. It's just being held hostage. I'm taking it back. The upload began. Ross watched the progress bar climb. Almost there. 78%. 92%. Then, the lights flickered. Lena's heart skipped. No. Ross slammed the keyboard. They found the signal. Malcolm moved toward the breaker. Get it up. Trying. Suddenly the screen went black. The room fell silent. Then Ross whispered. It didn't finish uploading. Malcolm's expression hardened. Then we finish this the old-fashioned way. How? He grabbed his coat. We take it to court. Later that night, outside the Riverside Federal Courthouse, Malcolm stood in the shadows, watching the building glow under floodlights. He turned to Lena. Tomorrow I walk in there with every piece of evidence we have left. They wanted to erase my name. A pause. Now they'll remember it. Morning broke over Riverside Heights like a stage light rising on the final act of a play no one was ready for. The sun gleamed off the courthouse dome, painting the marble steps in gold. Ironic, considering what was about to happen inside. Reporters crowded the sidewalk, cameras flashing, voices rising. Director Reeves, are the corruption charges true? Is it true you leaked federal data? Do you deny involvement with the Warrendale Group? Malcolm Reeves said nothing. He adjusted his tie and walked straight through the noise, flanked by Detective Lena Cross on one side and Ross on the other. Every step he took echoed louder than the shouts behind him. Inside, the courthouse buzzed like a hornet's nest. Security was tight. Armed guards, metal detectors, the faint tension of eyes watching from every corner. In courtroom 3B, the seats were filled. Government officials, journalists, FBI representatives, even Deputy Director Samuel Graves sitting smugly in the second row, pretending to be a neutral observer. At the front, the judge, Honorable Miriam Holt, adjusted her glasses and spoke with practiced calm. This hearing concerns former FBI Director Malcolm Reeves, charged with unauthorized data leaks, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy against the United States. Malcolm stood beside his lawyer, silent, calm. He could feel the stares pressing on him, some angry, some fearful, some curious. The whole country was watching. Lena sat in the gallery, notebook in hand. Her pulse thudded in her throat. She knew the truth. Everyone in this room knew it. But knowing and proving were two very different things. The prosecutor, Assistant DA Carrington, rose. He was slick, confident, the kind of man who smiled while twisting a knife. Your Honor, he began, this case is simple. The defendant, Malcolm Reeves, abused his authority within the Bureau to conduct unauthorized surveillance, falsify warrants, and fabricate evidence against government officials. His actions resulted in the deaths of 2 officers, including Sergeant Daniel Vance, and the destruction of a federal facility. Murmurs rippled through the court. Carrington continued, Mr. Reeves claims he was uncovering corruption, but evidence suggests otherwise. In fact, financial transfers from foreign accounts link directly to his private holdings. Malcolm finally raised his head. His voice was calm but cold. You mean the accounts you created after wiping my record? Carrington smirked. You'll have your chance to speak, sir. The trial moved fast. Too fast. Every piece of evidence presented by the prosecution was too perfect, too clean. Fake wire logs, doctored timestamps, digital records that made him look guilty. Lena whispered to Ross, "They're rewriting his story in real time." Ross nodded grimly. "They've got access to Bureau archives. They're editing the truth as they speak." By mid-afternoon, the prosecution rested. It was Malcolm's turn. He stood, buttoning his jacket, his expression unreadable. "Your Honor, before I begin, I'd like to submit new evidence for the record." The judge raised an eyebrow. "What evidence?" Malcolm held up a small flash drive, a backup, created before the Bureau purged my files. Carrington laughed. "Your Honor, the defendant has already tampered with data. Allowing this would compromise." "Overruled," Judge Holt said firmly. "The court will review it." Malcolm stepped forward, handing the drive to the clerk. "Play it." The screens around the courtroom flickered to life. At first, static. Then, video. A timestamp. A hidden camera feed. Inside a luxury office sat Arthur Keaton, speaking with none other than Deputy Director Samuel Graves. "Keaton, Reeves is getting too close. You have to take him down before the files go public." Graves, "Don't worry. We'll scrub his record and feed the press whatever story we need. Once he's discredited, we'll handle the cleanup." Gasps filled the courtroom. Graves shot up from his seat. "That's fabricated," he shouted. Malcolm turned slowly, meeting his eyes. "Funny. That same phrase is in your memo authorizing my arrest." The courtroom erupted. Carrington fumbled. "Your Honor, we request a recess." "Denied," Holt said. "Continue, Mr. Reeves." Malcolm took a deep breath. "For months, I've been tracking Warrendale Holdings, a criminal enterprise disguised as a property management firm. But they're not alone. They operate under federal contracts. They use police officers, judges, and even bureau executives to enforce their silence. When I got close, they erased my name. When that failed, they tried to erase me." He turned back to the jury box. "You were told I leaked classified data. That's true, because the classification was protecting criminals, not the public. You were told I destroyed evidence. That's also true, because sometimes you have to burn the rot to see the bones." A tense silence followed. Even the prosecutor couldn't look him in the eye. Then, the back doors opened. Two men in dark suits entered quietly, flashing badges. FBI, Internal Affairs. One leaned to whisper in the judge's ear. She nodded grimly. "Mr. Reeves," she said, "please step forward." He did. The agent handed her a sealed folder. "We have verified the footage's authenticity. It matches the Bureau's internal surveillance timestamp." The courtroom gasped again. The judge read quickly, then looked up. "Deputy Director Graves, you are under arrest for conspiracy, evidence tampering, and obstruction of justice." The color drained from Graves's face as the agents cuffed him. Malcolm watched silently as the man was led away. The same man who had once mentored him. The man who had built the system he was now tearing down. After the chaos settled, the judge turned to Malcolm. "This court finds you not guilty on all charges." A collective exhale swept the room. Reporters scribbled frantically. Cameras clicked. But Malcolm didn't smile. He just bowed his head slightly. "Thank you, Your Honor." The judge nodded. "The Bureau owes you an apology. The country does." He met her eyes. "They don't owe me anything. They owe the people honesty." Outside the courthouse, the world exploded again. Crowds cheering, reporters pushing forward, microphones flashing. Lena stood beside him. "You did it," she said softly. "You actually did it." Malcolm glanced toward the horizon, where the sunset burned orange behind the city skyline. Not yet, he murmured. They'll replace Graves with someone else. The system protects itself. Ross joined them, holding his phone. But your video just hit 1 million views in under an hour. They can't bury this anymore. Malcolm's lips curved faintly. Then, maybe we've started something bigger than one trial. That night, as the city lights flickered awake, Malcolm sat alone in his small apartment. His phone buzzed, unknown number. He answered. A calm voice on the other end said, "Congratulations, Director. You just made enemies you can't see." Malcolm leaned back, unafraid. Good. That means I'm still looking in the right direction. Click. The line went dead. Outside, sirens wailed in the distance, blending with the hum of the city. A reminder that justice was never quiet, never finished. Malcolm stared out the window, his reflection caught in the glass. Tired, scarred, but unbroken. He whispered to himself, "You can erase a name, but not a truth." The night after the verdict, the whole country buzzed with Malcolm Reeves's name. News anchors praised him. Politicians condemned him. Social media called him a hero and a traitor in the same breath. But while the nation argued, somewhere deep inside Washington's polished offices, men in suits spoke quietly over brandy and candlelight. Reeves didn't just expose corruption, one said. Voice sharp as glass. He exposed us. A silent nod passed around the table. Files changed hands. A single phrase was written in bold across the cover page. Project Clean Slate. Meanwhile, back in Riverside Heights, Malcolm sat in his dark apartment, the glow of his laptop flickering across his face. The news replayed clips of the trial again and again. His voice, his evidence, his speech. Justice isn't blind, it's just being held hostage. He stared at his reflection in the screen. The words didn't feel like victory. They felt like a warning. Lena Cross entered quietly, carrying a small box of takeout. "You haven't eaten in a day," she said softly. He didn't look up. "You ever wonder what happens after you win?" She frowned. "You rebuild." He turned to her, eyes tired but steady. "Not when the people you exposed still control the system you work for." Ross burst through the door moments later, breathless, laptop under his arm. "We've got a problem," he said, voice shaking. Malcolm stood. "What kind of problem?" Ross set the laptop on the table, typing fast. The screen filled with encrypted emails, timestamps blinking red. "Someone accessed the Bureau's secure database using your old credentials. They're leaking classified data under your name." Lena's eyes widened. "They're framing you again." Malcolm's jaw tightened. "No, they're baiting me." He clicked through the files. Dozens of top-secret operations, falsified memos, and doctored images, now tied directly to his account. Ross muttered, "They're calling it the Reeves leak. News outlets are already running it. They're saying you exposed informants overseas." Malcolm leaned on the table, his voice low. "They're trying to turn me from a whistleblower into a traitor. That way, the public forgets why I started this." Lena clenched her fists. "So what's the move?" He looked at her. "We find who's behind Project Clean Slate, and we end it." Hours later, in a dimly lit parking structure beneath City Hall, Malcolm met an old contact, Agent Darius Cole, a man he'd once mentored before internal affairs fell apart. Cole's face was pale, his hands trembling slightly as he handed over a flash drive. "I shouldn't even have this," he whispered. "You didn't hear it from me, but Clean Slate is a kill order." Malcolm frowned. "Authorized by who?" Cole shook his head. "It's not official. It's buried under something called the Strategic Stability Board, a private oversight council. But there's more. It's run out of the Whitefield Foundation. Lena's breath caught. Whitefield. That's Warrendale's parent company. Cole nodded. You see it now? It's not corruption anymore. It's consolidation. They've turned government oversight into private enforcement. And you are the only one they didn't buy. Malcolm pocketed the drive. Then I guess they'll have to rent a bullet. Cole's eyes darted around. You don't get it, sir. These people don't miss. Malcolm looked away, voice steady. Neither do I. That night, the three of them set up camp in an abandoned print factory. Cold, dark, but safe. Ross pulled the files from the drive. Names appeared on the screen. Not just politicians, CEOs, bankers, and defense contractors. And at the top of the list was one name that froze everyone. Deputy Director Samuel Graves, deceased. Lena whispered, but he's dead. We saw him arrested. Malcolm leaned forward. That's what they wanted us to think. Ross scrolled deeper. You're right. He's alive, relocated under an alias 2 days ago. New ID, new clearance level, under the Whitefield Foundation. Malcolm stood. Then this isn't over. Graves was never a pawn. He was the architect. The sound of sirens broke the silence. Blue and red light spilled through the cracked windows. Ross, Malcolm said calmly, wipe the system. Already on it. Lena peeked outside. They found us. Not they, Malcolm corrected. Loading his sidearm. Him. Outside, black SUVs surrounded the building. Dozens of armed men in tactical gear fanned out. Faces covered, insignias missing. Loudspeakers blared. Malcolm Reeves. This is the Federal Recovery Task Force. Step out with your hands up. Lena's voice trembled. Federal Recovery? That's not a bureau division. Malcolm's eyes narrowed. No. It's Whitefield. The first bullet shattered the window. Glass rained across the room as Ross ducked behind a desk, clutching the hard drives. Move, Malcolm barked. They sprinted toward the factory's lower floor as gunfire echoed through the rafters. Sparks flew as bullets struck metal beams. Malcolm led them through a maze of machinery, returning fire with surgical precision. He wasn't running. He was guiding, controlling. When they reached the exit, an explosion rocked the building behind them. The roof caved in, smoke billowing into the night. They stumbled into an alley, coughing, bruised but alive. Ross clutched the drive to his chest. That's the last copy. If we lose this, it's over. Malcolm looked toward the flashing lights in the distance. Then we protect it with everything we've got. They fled to the docks, the city lights fading behind them. Waves slapped against the pier as fog rolled in, thick and ghostly. Lena leaned against a crate, catching her breath. They'll hunt us to the edge of the earth. Malcolm reloaded his weapon. Then we go beyond it. Ross frowned. You're not thinking straight. You can't take on the Foundation alone. Malcolm looked at him. I'm not alone. The truth's with me, and once it's out, they can't kill it. He handed Ross the drive. Get this to a secure drop in D.C. Contact journalist Dana Rivera. She's the only one who won't fold. Ross hesitated. What about you? Malcolm gave a faint smile. I'll buy you time. As Ross disappeared into the fog, Lena turned to him. You're planning to draw them out, aren't you? He nodded. They think they control the game. Time to remind them I built it. She looked at him, eyes filled with fear and admiration. If you go down, he cut her off gently, then make sure they never forget why. Minutes later, headlights emerged through the mist. The black SUVs again, silent, patient, like predators. Malcolm stood tall at the edge of the dock, the wind whipping his coat, the ocean dark behind him. A man stepped out of the lead vehicle. Gray hair, calm smile. Samuel Graves. Hello again, Director, he said smoothly. You didn't really think I'd rot in a cell, did you? Malcolm's eyes hardened. You're not a director anymore, Graves. You're just a ghost with expensive shoes. Graves chuckled. And you're a dead man clinging to ideals that don't exist. Malcolm raised his gun. Then let's see which one disappears first. The standoff hung in the air. Two men, two worlds colliding under the hum of the storm. A single drop of rain fell. Then another. Then gunfire. Rain poured down in sheets over riverside docks, lightning flashing across the bay. The gunfire from moments before echoed through the mist, bouncing off the shipping containers and fading into the roar of thunder. Malcolm Reeves crouched behind a steel crate, his pulse steady, eyes sharp. Smoke coiled in the air where bullets had struck. He could hear Samuel Graves's men moving closer. The soft crunch of boots, the metallic click of safeties released. End of the line, Reeves. Graves's voice called from the fog. You've done enough damage. Walk away, and maybe I'll let the girl live. Malcolm's jaw tightened. You never could negotiate without lying, could you? From behind another stack of crates, Lena Cross appeared, wet hair plastered to her face, gun steady in her trembling hands. He's bluffing, she whispered. Malcolm nodded. I know. The rain softened for a moment, a false calm. Then Graves stepped into view, wearing a dark trench coat, face half lit by the flashing lights from the docks. His smug grin glistened like oil. You could have had everything, Malcolm, he said. They would have promoted you, protected you. Instead, you threw it all away for an ideal. Malcolm rose from cover slowly, unarmed now, rain dripping down his face. No, I threw it away because the truth doesn't serve power. Power serves truth, or it destroys itself. Graves smirked. Still quoting philosophy in a gunfight. You never change. He raised his weapon. Goodbye, Director. But before he could fire, a sudden spotlight blazed across the dock. Bright, blinding. A voice crackled through hidden speakers. This is FBI Command Unit 7. Drop your weapons. The area is surrounded. Graves froze. No, he muttered. Impossible. Lena blinked. I thought they were all compromised. Malcolm smiled faintly. Not all of them. From behind the light, armored vans rolled in. Armed agents poured out, but not under Graves' flag. These bore the insignia of the Justice Oversight Task Force, a separate internal division reinstated by federal emergency order, triggered automatically when Malcolm's dead man protocol went live. Ross had done it. Within seconds, the dock erupted into chaos. Graves's men turned and fired, but they were outnumbered. Malcolm and Lena moved as one, covering angles, ducking under crates, disarming enemies with precision born from purpose. When the last shot faded, Graves was on his knees, cuffed, his trench coat soaked through. Malcolm approached slowly. You built your empire on silence, Graves, but you forgot one thing. Graves glared up at him. And what's that? Malcolm knelt down beside him. Even silence leaves echoes. Oh, 2 days later, the footage hit every major network in the country. Real-time video from Ross's emergency upload. Project Clean Slate. The Warrendale Group. Names, faces, accounts. Everything. The story exploded. It became the largest anti-corruption investigation in modern U.S. history. Dozens of officials were arrested. The Whitefield Foundation's assets were frozen. But for Malcolm, there was no celebration, only quiet. He stood alone in a hospital hallway, watching through a window as Lena lay in a recovery bed, bandaged but breathing. She'd been grazed in the shoulder during the raid. A nurse passed by and whispered, "She's lucky to have someone like you." He smiled faintly. No, I'm lucky to have someone like her. Later that night, Malcolm sat on the hospital roof, overlooking the city lights. Rain had stopped. The skyline shimmered like a mirror. Ross joined him, holding 2 coffees. You know, he said softly, the Bureau wants you back. Malcolm laughed quietly. The Bureau doesn't know what it wants. It's still cleaning up its own mess. Ross nodded. They're calling you the man who brought the system to its knees. He took a sip of coffee. How's it feel to be a hero? Malcolm looked at the horizon. Heroes win battles. I just told the truth. Days later, a Senate hearing convened to address the aftermath. Malcolm appeared, calm and composed, standing before the same government that once tried to erase him. Senator Vasquez leaned forward. Director Reeves, after all you've exposed, what do you believe justice truly is? He paused, glancing at the cameras, the nation watching live. Justice, he said quietly, isn't revenge. It's responsibility. It's looking power in the eye and saying, you don't own the truth, the people do. The room fell silent. Then, slowly, applause broke out. Weeks passed. Life began to return to normal. Lena recovered. Ross returned to his family. The Bureau started rebuilding under new leadership. Malcolm moved quietly through it all, turning down interviews, avoiding cameras. He wasn't interested in fame. He was interested in peace. One evening, he walked through Riverside Heights again. The same city that had once framed him, hunted him, and watched him stand alone. Children played on the sidewalks. Neighbors waved. He stopped at the corner diner, the same one from months ago. The waitress recognized him instantly. It's really you, she said softly. He smiled. Still make the best coffee in town? She laughed nervously. On the house, for the man who took down the bad guys. He shook his head. I didn't take them down. I just showed people they existed. Outside, the sun dipped below the skyline, casting long orange shadows across the street. Malcolm stood there for a long moment, breathing in the quiet. A message vibrated on his phone. From Ross. Encrypted file. Echo 7 protocol. Final release. When the world forgets, let this remind them. Malcolm looked up at the sky, a soft smile crossing his face. He whispered to himself, not today, old friend. The world remembers now. He slid the phone into his pocket and walked away into the fading light, his silhouette dissolving into the crowd, not as a ghost of the Bureau, but as a man who'd finally reclaimed his name. They tried to erase his name, but truth has a way of surviving. Because no matter how dark the system gets, one voice can still break the silence. If you believe justice isn't about power, it's about courage, then like, share, and subscribe for more stories where truth fights back.